And welcome to Unplanned, the show about cities and how they work. I'm Sam, your host. Remember to hit the subscribe button. And today on Unplanned, we're going to do a 2021 review and a 2022 preview with two returning guests, wonderful people, each of them. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but briefly I'll say to my far right is Craig Kelley, who you've seen a couple of times on Unplanned. And to my near right is Julia Hansen, who you've also seen on Unplanned. Without more further ado, welcome to you both.
Thank you, Sam. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's great to have you both. Why don't you just tell the nice people a little bit about who you are, just so they can remember you from previous episodes. Who wants to go first?
Julia?
All right, I'll go first. So my name is Julia Hansen. I have lived in the Boston, Cambridge, Somerville area for about 7 years at this point. I spent a long time working at a local institution, Cambridge Innovation Center, where I ran a digital fabrication lab and became really interested in the circular economy. Right now, I work remotely for Amazon in the Sustainable Operations Division.
Great, and we agreed that we wouldn't talk about Amazon, so we'll save that for some other episode. Craig? Who are you?
I'm Craig. I'm just bewildered. Amazon runs the world. So if you can't talk about Amazon, what can you talk about? So I'm Craig Kelley, a longtime friend of Sam's and a friend, but not for as long, of Julia's, a former city council member, a former Marine, and eager to change the world. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation.
Awesome. And what you can't see off camera is dog Wendy, who's over there chewing a bone. So you may see Wendy from time to time.
Very good girl.
Yeah, she's being a very, very good girl, which is actually kind of surprising because you both know Wendy from when Wendy's kind of crazy. So that's good. So we're going to do a review of 2021 and a preview, and we were going to look at trends. And this is all urban stuff, right? We're going to focus on sort of urban stuff. We agreed we wouldn't stray into more general topics. Who wants to go first? Who wants to start with a trend that they're focused on or have focused on, they think is important or they thought was important last year? Who's going to kick us off here?
Craig,
Sure.
you want to go first?
Sure, I'll start.
I went first last time.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm just afraid I'm going to take up the whole 25 minutes.
No, it's okay.
That will be the trend. Craig talking too much, as always.
Our agreement is that we'll jump in. When he's going too far, we'll jump in.
We'll hold him to it.
All right, take us away.
So for me, the trend of 2021...
And we'll be interacting with him, just to give you a preview.
Interacting as opposed to interrupting.
We'll be doing both, but you go ahead, yeah.
So I think it's a trend that started long ago, continued into 2021, and will continue into 2022. And that is the use of batteries to power small personal mobility devices. Everyone's talking about electric vehicles. We've got electric cars. We've got electric trains. Someone's figuring out an electric airplane that'll fly from Cape Cod to the islands. But the real explosion in use, and I think something that has an awful lot of potential to change the way cities operate, for better if we plan it right, for worse if we don't plan it right, maybe even don't think it's going to happen, is what we've started calling micromobility. And micromobility includes, of course, bicycles, but really the explosion is in things that have batteries, the one wheels, the scooters. There's a scooter racing league. Things go 60 miles an hour.
Wow.
These stand-up scooters. You're standing up on a scooter. So to me, that's the trend to watch. It's going to reshape urban mobility, and nothing shapes a city more than the way people get around in it.
Yeah.
So, go ahead. Reactions, thoughts?
I was thinking, given how people have sort of moved out of core city centers during the pandemic, maybe more into suburbs or maybe even farther away, I'm interested to see whether we can provide the bike lane infrastructure to get those people to come into the city on electric bikes. We know that's probably not an option with just regular bikes because the distances are too long.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I have got zero tolerance for the words bike lane anymore. It is an obsolete concept. Bikes as a meaningful form of transportation are no longer really what they were thought to be 10 years ago. Even e-bikes, which are not bikes, aren't really, in my opinion, going to carry us. It's going to be a lot more scooters. It's going to be maybe three-wheel trikes with 1 or 2 passengers. Might wind up being something like a Bonzer car. But our myopic thinking about bikes and e-bikes and bike lanes is getting in the way of rethinking urban transportation.
Well, let me jump in here. So, what are you imagining for the range of these vehicles? So it sounds like the bike or even the e-bike isn't carrying us a far enough distance. Is that what you're saying, or you're saying that
the bike and the e-bike is limiting our thinking as to what this stuff is. I can't even tell you what it all is because it probably changed since I looked it up this morning. But you've got rocket skates, skates that are roller skates but have electric motors in them that go really fast. You've got one wheels, which are sort of these unicycle things that are powered. You've got hoverboards, you've got electric skateboards, you got the stand-on scooters, you got the sit-on scooters, you got the e-bikes, you got the e-trikes, you got the stand-up scooters with the self-balancing front 2 wheels, you've got jetpacks.
But is it the speed of these vehicles that's the issue?
I think that's where we're going to wind up going. We're going to have to start thinking about what belongs at what speed on the road. And the speed sheer between a really slow cyclist like myself, who's maybe putzing around at 12 miles an hour, and someone on a scooter.
By the way, that's fast for me. But yeah, go ahead.
Someone on a scooter who's going 30 on an out-of-the-crate scooter. A fellow at my gym, he can break 30. He weighs 2+. And with his kid on it, he can break 30 miles an hour. Yeah. These things don't belong in the, quote, bike lane.
Or
e-bikes.
In the vehicle lane either.
Well, why not the vehicle lane? Why do we think of bike lanes and vehicle lanes? What about speed lanes?
Speed lanes, yeah.
What about other ways?
So you were saying divide the road width by speed. So it doesn't matter what you're on necessarily. It's, are you going 5 miles an hour? Are you going 15 miles an hour? Are you going 25 miles an hour? Is that what you're saying?
You could do something like that, or you could just cap it all at 15 miles an hour. And the reality is 15 miles an hour is probably faster than you average anyways as you go through an urban area.
Oh, I would think so. I mean, one of the facts that I remember from way back when I was studying planning was the average speed crossing the city of London hasn't changed in the last 150 years. Whether you were on a horse, in a cart, in a gas-powered car, whatever, on a train, it has not changed at all, which is a fascinating. Julia, I wanted to get back to a point, or something you said, which is that with COVID, and I think COVID is kind of overarching a lot of our thoughts these days, continues to, is that people have moved out of city centers. Do we know, is that accurate? Is that true? I don't actually know that.
I think so. I haven't, scoured the internet for the most accurate statistics on that, but I think that's what we are seeing. It certainly seems to be what's being reported in the news.
But it's not being reflected dramatically in rent decreases. So if the market of housing is something that tells us where people want to live, Cambridge has gone up.
Yeah, the
Boston
rents are still up.
edged down a tiny bit, maybe.
I think there's also, some maneuvering by landlords to, do things that would accommodate not lowering the rent. I think there's like a lot of deals on giving 1 month free, 2 months, 2 months free. In order to sort of artificially keep the rents up. I think that is maybe like an asterisk on that point.
Well, let me ask you, and without going too much into your private life, but I know you left Cambridge where you were living at the beginning of COVID, and you got far away. But you're back in the region.
Yeah.
So are you an example of somebody who left in the initial part of COVID?
Yeah, well, so I left for just under a year, lived in a small town in Montana, and it was, COVID really gave me and my husband the opportunity to just see some place different in this country. And we're back now, partly because of jobs coming back in person. But I think, so whether or not it's like people permanently moving out of the city or just finding different ways of spending their time increasingly out of the city without making it necessarily a permanent move. Just one other thing that I read recently was that
Wendy, come on.
she wants to be part of the conversation.
The trend, there is the trend for people to get the
People are
pandemic
getting
pups,
the
right?
pandemic puppy. They need a yard for that. But
We're back. We had a little accident with Wendy in that a vase with some water got spilled, so we had to take a little break, but we're back now. Craig, you were just finishing up with your trend. What was you were making a point about?
I was making a point about data. And so we all have a lot of anecdotal stories and we read the newspaper. And I think for me, a trend is when you've got data that says something and you've got anecdotal stuff that is supported by the data, and then your real life experiences say, yeah, this is in fact going on. So when I talk about micromobility, the numbers are there. E-bikes are exploding in sales, one wheels, all that stuff are exploding in sales. And I'm reading about it. I'm reading about people getting killed by these things. And then I'm seeing it at the gym. I'm seeing it on the street. So I see this stuff, and that's a 3-tier to creating what I think is a trend.
All right, so that's Craig and his trend. Julia, we're going to bump it over to you now.
Yeah. Well,
What's your trend?
So my trend is more of like an observation. And I think the way that we manage stuff is changing. Not just last year, I think from sort of leading into the pandemic, I think it definitely took off during the pandemic with all the online shopping, but definitely a trend from last year has been the acceleration of infrastructure being built to get us our stuff quicker. Online shopping, Amazon, of course, this is something that's on my mind a lot these days. But I think the online shopping boom has led to increased air cargo ports for 2-day shipping, 1-day shipping. The number of delivery vehicles that are on our streets, I think that's becoming a greater proportion of the trips that are happening on our city streets. And the rapid increase in rents for warehouses and the availability of warehouse space is changing a lot. And I think that tends to happen at sort of like the periphery of urban areas, and maybe like here in dense Cambridge, we don't see that so much. We see it more in terms of the delivery vehicle movement, the competition of those vehicles with people parking, people
with my micromobility trend. Your trend is competing with my trend.
Right. And
do you have any data behind your trend?
Yeah, I definitely have some data, but I think what we need to definitely see from our city leadership is like how to share space on streets between those increased delivery vehicles, how that transitions into deliveries happening via micromobility. You mentioned e-bikes and the sort of like smaller scale micromobility vehicles, but I think
you could have delivery robots.
Exactly, you could have
on the sidewalk.
You know, those 3-wheelers that you see all over the place in Africa and India.
Is that a bicycle?
A bicycle with
Right.
a trunk on the back, essentially.
Is it e-powered? I mean, is it assist? Or
It potentially could be.
Right.
But we have
Yeah.
robotic delivery devices in America, and probably other places as well, that will take your Amazon or whatever delivery and run a programmed route. And that's micromobility too. It's just
Yeah.
not for people.
Right. Exactly. It's micromobility for stuff.
Right.
And so I think our expectations of like how fast we get our stuff has been a clear pandemic shift. And
how fast we get our stuff, and also the expectation.
the expectations around getting our
right,
stuff.
right.
And that kind of leads me into sort of like this other side of the coin in my mind about how we, like our relationship to stuff and how that's changing.
Yeah.
All these online orderings, like there's a lot of like.
Where are you going with that? Because I'm actually I'm kind of fascinated by that concept
Yeah.
as well. Like,
Well, I
weird.
think when we order online, there's a increased chance that we're not going to get what we expect, and so our day-to-day accumulation of stuff, our decisions to send things back, I think consumers are noticing or sort of tuning into the fact that when they send their stuff back, it doesn't necessarily go straight back into the inventory. Sometimes it's destroyed, sometimes it's just left. And that is a big problem for people who are trying to be very conscientious about what they buy, what they consume, where they spend their money.
Can I interject about the buying something? So I got a camera mount for my helmet, and I ordered a camera mount thing, and it turns out that the camera mount thing is just a thing that attaches to your helmet. You need then another thing to adapt to the thing on your helmet, but when I got all the pieces together, you need a screw to attach them all, and they didn't come with a screw. So I had 3 separate packages, all of which were useless, except I had a screw in my garage that fit if I put the right bolt on it. So
Happen to have it.
It just happened, right? Most people probably wouldn't. So you're a bit about, is it
Right.
really going to work the way we expected it to? No.
And then how do you use your space in your home, given that you've now acquired these 3 things that don't necessarily fit together and don't meet your expectations?
Cat toys.
Cat toys, I think people are using their living rooms as offices, or they're downsizing. Just the way that there's like a huge demand for warehouse space right outside cities. There's also now a increased demand in personal storage spaces, like self-storage.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah,
Is
and
that's actually happening? Yeah.
that's actually happening. A lot of new businesses coming into that sector to meet that demand, and like new sort of like formulas or ways of finding extra space for this kind of purpose, like within urban centers as well.
Yeah.
Just on your point of the transportation and packaging costs, I was surprised to learn recently that the carbon cost, or like the material cost, the energy that goes into creating something and delivering it to the final customer, most of that is bound up in the product. Transportation is a huge source of greenhouse gases and carbon emissions, but compared to what goes into actually producing the thing, whether it's like food, whether it's like your computer, your microphone, most of that energy spent
Is in this. It's not in shipping.
It's not in the shipping. It's not in the packaging, which doesn't solve our. It doesn't absolve us of needing to figure out decarbonized transportation and what to do with all the packaging and the recycling systems that we have, so that.
Are you saying we should consume less in general?
Oh, here we go.
I guess that's what I'm saying, Craig.
Is that the trend that we want to see?
Well, let's ask Craig. Reactions, response, thoughts. I mean, what are you hearing when you hear Julia?
I love eBay. Right? That's how
Yeah.
I got my camera stuff. Fortunately, I have a buddy that wants to offload all of his, not all, but a lot of his computer and photography equipment. But it's difficult not to let your imagination run away with, if I only had this camera, if I only had, now of course, if I only locked my car all the time, I would still have the camera that I used to have.
Yeah.
So there's this whole idea of scarcity, and I'm going to get something, then maybe it's broken or stolen, so I have to go get another one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
But
go
I
ahead.
think you bring up a really good point, which I also wanted to address. Given the supply chain issues, the market for secondhand things has also shot up a lot. And I've experienced that personally in moving back to Cambridge recently, trying to get all of my new furniture from Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, eBay in some cases.
Successfully? I mean, finding
successfully, yeah.
Yeah.
But what I expect to see change based on that is infrastructure for reusing things more easily, or rather
Like, what do you
finding
mean? What do you mean?
new owners for previously owned things. So as I kind of touched on before, I think people are discovering that they have too much stuff, and that came to be partly because of the ease of getting things, and now they're partially from.
Is this stuff they own, or is this stuff that they owe debt on?
No,
Like, are they paying their credit card debts off?
Physical things that they've
No, I get
acquired.
that. But say I buy a $500 camera and I put it on my credit card with a $10,000 credit limit. Am I paying that off at the end of the month, or do I have $8,000 of credit on one card and $7,000 on another, and I'm buying stuff and digging my...
Yeah.
I don't know. Interesting. I mean, I love the.
But I think
yeah,
people
go
are
ahead,
trying
sorry.
to sort of like declutter, and
Right.
that combined with supply chain issues in the last few months, I think is creating the conditions for a big secondhand market to flourish, and people are more accustomed to it perhaps now after going through what I went through of like trying to like buy things online
I
that
had
weren't deliverable.
four chairs in a foyer that we used sort of as a bench, and it just didn't work as a setup.
Right.
And my son had made a bench for college. He brought it back. I'm like, well, this will work. So I put his bench in a foyer, took the 4 chairs out, posted them on free stuff on Craigslist, and they were gone in 8 hours.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because the purchasing online is almost by definition a distance purchase, and the resale sale is a local event, which is really
Well,
interesting.
my Facebook stuff not Facebook, my eBay stuff got shipped to me from far, far away. I think one
That's
of them
true.
might have come from England.
Right. No, that is true.
That's
I guess that
yeah.
is also true. Is it an economic divergence, or do you think? I mean, it's
Possibly. I'm
Right.
not. I don't know
Yeah, if you went into
the
that.
data around that.
all right. Let me get on to mine, and then we'll just see where we're at that point. I was actually going in a very similar direction as you. I am actually fascinated by this, the impact of e-commerce on localities, and mostly because I saw something online about it, and I just found it fascinating about the warehouse space, the trucks. I mean, just to make a point about where I live, there's a very sharp corner around here. There's snow on the ground right now. And there was an Amazon truck just trying to make that corner, and it probably took 5 minutes. And you think about
And when you say Amazon, my belief is it's not really an Amazon truck.
it was branded.
It's a contracted someone or other who's got the Amazon logo and is delivering Amazon stuff, and
Possibly, yeah.
maybe delivering from a algorithm by Amazon. But that's another part of this economy is all the subs that jump in to make it work.
Interesting. It was a branded truck.
No, I get
It
that.
had the full Amazon thing. But I was just thinking on the transportation side, and it goes back a little bit to the micromobility thing, of add up all those 5-minute 3-point turns all around the city of Cambridge. That's actually a lot of time that cars are backing up behind that truck, et cetera, et cetera. You sort of add up all that. I am actually fascinated by all that because one of the big picture, sort of more planary type questions that I've been fascinated about is Main Street recovery post-COVID. So COVID obviously like just hollowed out the main streets or sort of retail centers in cities and towns across Massachusetts, across the country, around the world. How do those storefronts come back, when all the customers are now much more accustomed to even for food establishments, DoorDash, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. So there's no
Permanence. Like people are spending less time on the actual main street.
And if I bought a pair of shoes online, why do I now go to my local shoe store again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's always been fascinating to me.
So I think what people pay for is a better overall product/experience. So I wanted a particular thing to mount my camera, and in my mind I thought I knew what I wanted. I go to Hunt's Camera, which is a 5-store chain in Harvard Square, and they didn't have what I wanted, but they had this other thing. It was a dashboard, clip mount, whatever. It worked really great until someone stole it from my car. But for people, if you don't know exactly what you're looking for, and you can depend on the people at the store to send you in the right direction, then I think you've got a good reason to go to the store. But if I've got to pay the same price and someone's telling me stuff that they don't know nothing about.
Yeah.
I agree. I actually think, it's funny you should say that because I agree with that 100%. Like, we pay, what do I pay for? What am I willing to pay for? I'm willing to pay for a good experience, right? Because
You're a millennial at heart, Sam.
other than all of this, I'm a millennial at heart. Well, yes, good point. Wendy is my millennial at heart. But it's true, I think, because now, you can get a pen anywhere, you can get a whatever anywhere, but you'd want the experience. That's worth it. That's actually worth it. But I want to go into, because you outlined that description so well, I want to throw another thing out there that's going in a completely different direction, which has been a personal fascination of mine more recently, which is public art. It's not a new trend, it's not a new thing by any means. But it just seems, particularly given everything we've been through over the last, I'm going to expand this without getting into details, the last 5 years, from all the discussions, and then COVID hits, and we've just been so beaten down by life in some ways. And I thought, there are these artists who create this stuff, and they put it out, and cities and towns and localities figure out public places for that art. And I just thought, what a wonderful thing. And it's the kind of thing that unless you pay attention to it, it just becomes background. It just is something you walk past and you don't really think about it. But it's out there, and it's all over the place. And I personally have just become fascinated by it. I don't know where it goes. I'm not sure it particularly goes anywhere, but I think it's one of those sort of stop and smell the roses kind of things. If you're so wrapped up in all the difficult things that we're all dealing with now, if you just stopped and you saw a piece of public art and you took a half a second to just sort of absorb it, it would make your day better if nothing else.
So let me riff off of that, Sam. I was at the Beth Israel Medical Center 2 days ago, and I was seeing a client, and I came out and I was walking by, and I saw this statue of, I don't even know what it was. It was some sort of Southeast Asian looking figurine, maybe half buried in the snow. And I stopped and I looked at it and I said, this is great. So I took out my camera and I took a picture of it. I said, no, that's not the right picture. And then I moved over about a foot and I got down lower and made sure. I may never look at that picture again, but that statue, that public statue that someone put there God knows how many years ago, with the snow drifting over it, that kept me occupied for about 3 minutes. And it was just one of those little things. They didn't need to put it there. Didn't help the hospital be a hospital. It was 3 minutes of my life that was made brighter because of that art.
And I can't help but also think, for whatever sets of reasons, there's an artist behind that art. Somebody actually labored maybe for years on that piece. It is an expression of who they are, and it's been put out in the public realm. The least we can do is give that, I'm going to say, that poor person 30 seconds of our time.
But you don't have to like it.
No, not at all. It doesn't have to be an appreciation in that sense. But it was somebody's work. It was somebody's work product.
And it was put there to be noticed. So whether you have a positive reaction to it or an ambivalent or a negative one, I think that's kind of the point of the artist, is just to provoke or to see, like, what would Craig do if he sees this thing
I would
right
take
here?
pictures of that. But so a trend, a personal Craig Kelley trend that hopefully will be discontinued in 2022 is watching too many TikTok videos on YouTube.
Oh.
And one of the things I fall into watching a lot of are public dancing displays. And these are astounding dancers. They're walking down a mall and all of a sudden it's a flash mob or it's a this or it's a that. And I'm always amazed at how inattentive so many of the people in the background seem to be to these 3, 4, 5 amazing dancers putting on a show for 35 seconds. And everyone is on their phone or walking away. So I don't know that public art always does what the artist hopes, even in terms of getting someone's attention, because we're so stimulated by our electronics. We're addicted to looking at our text. We're doing all this other
maybe
stuff.
afraid to engage with strangers.
Afraid to worried that maybe we'll have to give them a tip, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Well, we've gone through some of our reviews and some of our previews very quickly. 2022, good year, bad year, somewhere in between. What's your take? It can be personally, it can be publicly, it can be in any realm, professionally.
I think it is going to be a shakedown year. I think the trends.
Meaning what? What does that mean?
I think we have so much going on. What Julie was talking about, e-platforms, e-commerce, e-purchasing. What does that do to Main Street, as you're pointing out? The idea of mobility, whether it's micro-mobility or a car that drives itself. The political world is volatile. I think there's so much. To
say the least. We don't talk politics on this show, but
I phrased it carefully.
No.
I think, and we've got massive demographic shifts, and we're not out of COVID yet. So I think that 2023 is going to be a year we look back at 2022 and we say, okay, that's what 2021 created.
Yeah.
And then hopefully we can build off something productive there. But I'm looking forward to a bumpy year.
Julia, what's your take?
Yeah, I would probably agree with you, Craig. I think my personal take on plans for the future has been, I used to be a planner in terms of like my life, and now I realize that you can't plan anything. And so it's easy for me to say like no expectations. I just hope that we're able to do some good things.
Who's we in that
like
sentence?
Collectively, like I hope we can get more bike lanes, even though I'm open to doing more than just lanes for bikes. But I think participation is probably more important than ever. And one interesting aspect of the pandemic is that when there are community meetings like the City of Cambridge, opportunities to weigh in from the public on certain initiatives, now that that's all online, that could make it easier for a lot more people to tune in, weigh in.
That doesn't make them any happier, it turns out.
Yeah,
judging
not
from what I've been
necessarily,
hearing.
but it's an opportunity that might not have been available depending on what your schedule was in previous years.
I hate to say it, Julia, I'm so aligned with your thinking. That was going to be another one of my trends, was the whole online world. Not in the broadest sense, but in the fact of community meetings, right? Where, in the old days, you'd call a community meeting and 10 people would show up and 9 of them you could have named before the meeting started. And now that might be a 200-person meeting. Doesn't mean they're happier, but it does mean that people are able to participate much more. And I was talking to a young mother who said, there was some meeting. I couldn't go because I had kids and I had the whole bit, but I just put it on. I was in the kitchen doing stuff and I was listening to it with one ear and just kind of paying attention to the meeting. I was actually sort of at the meeting, but I was doing stuff at home. And, where does all that go? What does that mean for all of us? My take on 2022, I think you both describe it. I'm interested. Actually, it's fascinating you say, you can't plan. I mean, we're all planners at some level. We've all do that kind of work. Maybe it's one of the great human fallacies is that you can actually plan great stuff. The folly of man, the folly of humankind. I think my 2022 is more of a hope. I think independent of everything prior to COVID has just overturned the apple cart again and again and again and again. And we're obviously not out of it yet. And we probably won't be out of it for a long time. I guess I'm curious where we go. I do think that there's a fundamental shift and a realization that you just can't plan in the way that we used to plan. Oh, if we just do this, this will happen. And we now know that there are forces much greater than us that can change our lives radically. That's not much of an answer.
Are you saying we're powerless?
I'm saying I have less confidence that I have any sense of what 2022 will actually hold. I suppose I have more hopes about what it holds than any sense of what really will happen.
Isn't there a saying like people plan, God
laughs?
There you go. Last thoughts? Any final thoughts for our wonderful viewing audience and all of us?
So I had a horrible bike accident in September on my 59th birthday. I was mountain biking in Wisconsin, went off the road, smashed into a tree really hard. So every day that I can get out of bed and walk, I'm like, statistically, I really shouldn't be able to do this. So 2022, good year, bad year, and different year. I think for so many of us, it's a bonus year. So I'm excited about it, bumpy or not.
You?
No, that's a good way of putting it. I think 2021 was kind of like a bonus year where you kind of wondered like, where did that go? I thought this was like the end of 2020, but somehow there was another year of this. So I just want to say that it's been great to be able to get together in person. So thankfully we have COVID tests and like good strategies here that made it possible for us to be comfortable doing this today. So I'm grateful for that.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you both for coming. Thank you for joining us for this true podcast of Unplanned, where we're sitting around talking, and we look forward to bringing you some more. And hopefully we'll get you guys back on and talk about some other topics in the future.
Anytime. Love this.